Good afternoon to you. 506 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour from the Heritage Foundation, Roger Severino is here. We'll talk about those awful mask mandates and whether it's possible to banish the federal government from imposing those forever. Let's try and do that. We'll see what happens. Roger Severino joins us coming up. And this from New York City Mayor Eric Adams last night.
Let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City.
He's talking about illegal immigration. New York City now being overrun. And Mayor Eric Adams saying it's going to destroy the city. For more on this subject is Congressman Mark Green. He represents Tennessee's 7th Congressional District, and he's the chair of the Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, good to have you with us, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Vince, for having me on.
What do you make of Democrat mayors now speaking up on this?
Well, we knew it was coming, and tragically, the Democrats in the Congress just can't seem to get it. But I will say Eric Adams' solution to the problem is only going to make the problem worse. He's got the Democrat solution, but he's looking at the consequences to his city. I get that. I'm glad to have him speak up on that.
Yes.
The Massachusetts governor did the same, but their solution is still more money and worker permits, and that's just going to incentivize more people to come.
Yeah, Eric Adams has been saying that there's still a sanctuary city, which means that they don't cooperate with immigration and customs enforcement in deporting people who are here illegally, and especially who've committed crimes and end up in the prison system, the jail system, in New York City. How can they expect help from the federal government if they won't even help the federal government?
That's a great point. In Tennessee, when I was a state senator, I passed a law that took all state economic development money from any city that said it was going to be a sanctuary city and made it illegal in Tennessee. It's ridiculous that they would sit there and think and not even work on the ICE detainers. I mean, a sanctuary city doesn't even cooperate when there's a hardened criminal, a violent criminal who's in their city. So it's absurd that he'd turn around and then expect for us, the taxpayers, to come bail him out.
There's a headline in the Los Angeles Times today that may be a response to some of these Democrats now publicly complaining about all of this. Their headline is, Biden administration considers forcing migrant families to remain in Texas. They're referring to this as the Remain in Texas policy and suggesting that the Biden administration may force illegal immigrants to stay in that state while their asylum claims are considered. This is jaw-dropping to me, Congressman. It sounds like they are capable of enforcing the border so long as it's inside the United States. What do you make of this?
Yeah, that's insane. And I am guessing that Governor Abbott's just going to crank up the buses and keep them coming. And I hope he does. And if he does, I'll make a donation. It's absurd. You look at El Paso, Texas. They're on the border, a city of about 200,000. They're seeing 800 and something a day. This guy in New York City, they've gotten 100,000 over a period of however long, 2 years now, and they're calling it a crisis. They're a city of 11 million people. It's so disproportionate in Texas to the rest of the country. No wonder Abbott is putting buoys up on the river.
Yes. Well, these are all mayors, by the way, who did say that they are sanctuary cities, Congressman, which means that they invited all of this. Why are they complaining now?
Well, it's because Democrats always, particularly city mayors, because they're so progressive. I mean, they say one thing, do another. I mean, and look, this whole party is the party that wants to release criminals into the street. They're, completely fine doing a deal with Iranian terrorists. And, the cartels are abusing this and shipping drugs in. Leave the border wide open. I mean, they have no logic, period. So expecting them to think like a rational human being is that's a bar too high.
Now, of course, we're talking about some of the failures of the states and these mayors, and they invited all of this, and now it's happening, and they're not working with immigrations and customs enforcement. But on the other side is you have a federal government who has left the border wide open. They're insulting Texas by saying they're going to try and keep illegals in that state rather than let them get out. And you have a DHS secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, who has just absolutely let this happen with no end in sight. What can be done about Alejandro Mayorkas and his tenure as the head of the Department of Homeland Security?
What we're working on right now is a 5-phased approach, and I'm doing this in a methodical way just to educate as many Americans as possible and to put pressure on key Republicans who aren't there yet. And so
in terms of impeachment?
Yeah. So we're in phase 3 right now of this investigation, the human cost. We've got some great witnesses coming in next week. Fentanyl moms. We were even looking at some of the Border Patrol folks that have just really had to struggle with being overwhelmed down there and what it means on their families and stuff like that. We're going to look at the financial cost to the whole country in phase 4. Phase 5 will be waste, fraud, and abuse. We've got 2 reports out on phase 1 and phase 2 right now. Folks can access those. Phase 1 was the dereliction of duty phase, well over 125 pages long. The phase that we released just today, phase 2, was cartel crime, basically facilitating cartel crime in America. And we're going to compile all this. Of course, we're educating folks in the process, and then we'll make recommendations to the Judiciary Committee.
I appreciate the fact-finding efforts that you're undertaking and the information that you're sharing. That's all really important. But what troubles me is what more evidence do these other Republicans need? We have over 100,000 people dying due to drug overdoses every year in the United States. Their cartels are making billions and billions of dollars off of all of that death and destruction. Sex trafficking continues. Illegal immigration is so overwhelming that even Democrats are saying it out loud. You see voters who are very upset about all of this. Is any more information really going to change the mind of these Republicans who are not to the impeachment point yet?
Well, there are a couple of those guys, and they're on Judiciary Committee, and their interpretation of the impeachment legislation of a high crime and a misdemeanor, we have to establish, just like you would in a prosecution, that a crime was committed. Now, I don't want to show all my cards right now, but I think we're going to get there. And, hopefully those guys will come around and say, okay, yeah, this is criminal activity. Now, it's certainly a massive failure. Everyone knows this is a massive failure.
Yes.
Honestly, it's probably a success on their part. This is what they want to happen.
Yes.
But we've got.
But that's in violation of the law, isn't it? So if you want this outcome, you are violating the law.
They are absolutely breaking the law. They're ignoring court orders. But again, there's no statute that says if you're in a job and you don't follow execute the laws as it's written, that it's a crime. It's not doing your job. It's not following the law. But there's no law in the books that says, okay, if you don't execute this job, these are the elements of the crime and this is the punishment.
Yeah,
there ought to be. But there isn't, and impeachment is supposed to take care of it when they break the law, and we've got to prove that they've broken the law.
We're talking to Congressman Mark Green. He is the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, so the perfect guy to talk about this issue with. It was towards the tail end of last year, sir, that Kevin McCarthy, in his bid to become Speaker of the House, indicated that if Alejandro Mayorkas didn't step down, that he would contemplate moving to impeachment. Is he keeping his promise here? Obviously, now it's almost a year since he made that threat.
Yeah, so the first thing we did was we got in to pass the border security bill, and it took, a couple of months to get that done, and then we transitioned into this investigation stuff. For Kevin, it comes down to, do you run a vote and it not pass, or do you wait and try to convince people that are on the fence, like, McClintock and those guys over in the Judiciary Committee? There's 2 or 3 of them over there. Buck just made an announcement on CNN 2 days ago, I think it was, that he wasn't there yet. I mean, we have to convince those guys that there's been a crime committed, and we've been working on that. And that's the whole point of this investigation I'm doing, is just to lay all the evidence out and say,
right,
okay, here's what the guy's done. And again, I don't want to, show all my cards, but
right,
we've got a plan, and we're executing, and hopefully we'll convince them.
There are two other things that jump out about Mayorkas' testimony to me, and again, I know you don't want to show your cards, but one is I'm pretty convinced that he's lied to Congress about having control of the border. He's routinely said,
no doubt about
under
that,
oath, that he has control of the border, and that's obviously untrue to any, room temperature IQ observer. The other piece, is that he lied about the Border Patrol and that horsewhipping scandal. He went up there and prejudged it. He suggested those men were whipping Haitian migrants crossing our border, and he, by that point, had already received an email that had indicated that that was not the case, yet he lied to the American public. Clearly, this guy is not doing this job the way a Homeland Security Secretary is supposed to.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And when you think about just layer on top of that, ignoring our request for information, disregarding the laws written by Congress, those are all things that are in a sense a violation of your oath. Because if you take an oath to the Constitution of the United States, that means you are going to adhere to the principles of a separate but equal powers. And so when the Congress says this is the law and you're in the executive branch, if you take an oath to the Congress or to the Constitution, that means you're going to execute the laws passed by Congress, and he's completely failed to do that.
Yes.
And so, I mean, it's a violation of his oath on top of that.
Finally, sir, and again, thank you for your time, Congressman Mark Green. The Homeland Security side of this, if I just pull the lens back a little bit, how much of a threat is it to have this border be as wide open as it is and have so many foreign nationals who we don't know pouring into this country on a daily basis?
Well, there's a massive threat to our national security. You look at the Chinese nationals. Now, for 3 years prior to this, there was no statistical significance difference in the number of Chinese nationals coming in. This year alone, it's over 500% increase. And many of those are PLA. You know, we've even found folks that were former PLA members, People's Liberation Army of China. We know the mechanism that Russia used in Ukraine. They infiltrated, brought people over, set them up there. And now you've got these gate crashers on Chinese military or U.S. military installations, Chinese nationals that are gate crashing. Look, this is, if we were to go and defend Taiwan, there is no way I can be convinced there aren't saboteurs here waiting on us, and it's all because of an open southern border. This is all the blood of Americans, our national security, all in the hands of Alejandro Mayorkas, and we're doing everything we can to convince enough people to get that guy gone.
Okay. All right. Well, Congressman Mark Green, thank you for the information and thank you for the effort to get them over the finish line, because I think it seems pretty important for the country. Really appreciate your time today, sir.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
You too, Congressman Mark Green, again, chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. Always appreciate the input from lawmakers on this. And I, we always, every time I have these guys on, I do want to dig into, okay, what is actually happening here? When he says he's got Tom McClintock and Ken Buck and others saying they're not quite there yet. You heard him say, he flagged a couple of times, these are members, by and large, of the Judiciary Committee, a couple of them, who are still holding out for more evidence. What more evidence? How many people need to die before you achieve the evidence you need to impeach the DHS secretary? How many? Over 100,000 Americans a year are dying due to the drug overdoses that are occurring because the cartels are killing American citizens. How many more people? What misdemeanors are you looking for to cross the high crimes and misdemeanors threshold? So we'll keep asking until we get all of the answers. It's fine. Our thanks again to Congressman Mark Green, who was just with us moments ago as we talk about the immigration crisis, the border crisis here in the United States. Let's get Michael in Woodbridge in here. Line one. Michael, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
I got to tell you, Vince, I'm very happy to hear Congressman Green. I like him. He actually seems to be practicing what he's preaching. But these people have got to get serious about this. They've got to take Fannie Willis's charge sheet and start charging Democrats with conspiracy against rights. It's an ambiguous term, and it can be applied to damn near anything. And if you, as a sitting member of Congress, you as a sitting president, you as an appointee, are specifically bypassing your job, everything you're doing is a conspiracy to defraud the United States of America. I recognize that charge as well. There's a couple others in there. I mean, all you got to do is find color of law enhancements. If you have somebody in your charge and they die in your charge, that's unintentional homicide under color of law. It's an enhancement. Stop playing like this is a damn scrimmage game.
Yes.
Recognize that you're fighting. This is the Super Bowl, ladies and gentlemen. If we lose this game, there will be no more football. There will only be football.
Yeah, no, good point. And in fact, I'm looking here at a piece from a couple months ago. A couple of lawmakers, Republicans, Tom McClintock of California, you just heard from the congressman say that, yep. Ken Buck of Colorado, Tom Tiffany of Wisconsin. These are all members of the Judiciary Committee. They're all Republicans, and they're all against impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas because they say there's just not enough evidence yet that he violated any high crimes or misdemeanors.
And my solution bypasses that, though, Vince, because what they're saying is technically he is following immigration law, okay? But he's damn sure not following his oath to the Constitution. Right. He's damn sure not following the intent of the law. Therefore, he is defrauding the people of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but if it's not a law yet, it should damn sure be a law that if you defraud the people of the United States, I don't care about the damn government of the United States, you're defrauding the people. You're getting people killed with your actions.
He's exactly right. And he's aiding and abetting a total scam. I mean, the percentage of the people who have illegitimate asylum claims who are pouring into our country is so sky high that at some point you have to admit that the government's a part of a RICO operation. This is just a complete fraud upon the American people.
And you and I may disagree on the exact number. I use the 30 million illegal aliens for a reason. We were using 11 to 22 in 2008. It's a pretty safe bet that number is bigger than it was then.
I agree. I agree with you.
Every one of those people needs to eat, sleep, and poop somewhere, and that costs money.
It definitely does. Michael, thank you very much. Smart points all around. Trying to help some of these lawmakers find the intestinal fortitude to save our country, reestablish our borders. Roger Severino will join us just minutes from now. We'll talk about the government's knack for tyranny and mask mandates. Can we stop them from ever coming back? That's ahead. Good afternoon to you. It is 5:35 here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us today. 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Always grateful for your contributions. Stay cool out there. The cool weather is ahead. It'll improve. I want to focus on mask mandates. Now, JD Vance tried to get a piece of legislation passed today that would ban the federal government from ever imposing or encouraging or funding mask mandates again. Here's JD Vance today making his case on the floor of the Senate. This should have been passed easily, 100-0.
All of us have lived through the failed experiment of mass mandatory masking. Today, I want to ensure that we do not subject the American people to this tyranny again for the sake of nothing. We've recently seen a seasonal uptick of COVID cases across the country. This is not something to worry about. I don't like this fact, but COVID is here to stay.
Yes, and we should stop putting masks on kids for no reason. It's only hurting them.
We are about to have some serious respiratory problems. We always do in the fall, and maybe it will be worse this fall and this winter than before. But I think that what our children most of all need, and I'm the father of 3 kids under the age of 7, they need us to not be chicken little about every single respiratory pandemic and problem that confronts this country. We are going to have people who get sick from viruses. It has always been thus, and the way to respond to it is with calmness, resolve, and strategic thinking, not by pretending the world is ending, because what has always happened is going to happen once again.
Yeah, and not mandating government uniforms. Meanwhile, Democrat Senator Ed Markey got in the way of this legislation today. It wasn't able to be passed by unanimous consent. Here's Ed Markey.
The bill would undermine the ability of states, of cities, and towns across this country to make decisions about what's best for their communities. It would silence and hamstring public health experts who have guided our nation out of the darkest days of a pandemic that has killed 1,139,000 people in our country in 3 years.
There you have Ed Markey defending the government, telling you what to wear, and also suggesting that it somehow helped save lives during the pandemic. No evidence for that. Let's bring in Roger Severino, Vice President of Domestic Policy at the Heritage Foundation. He can talk about this. Roger, good to have you with us, sir.
Thanks for having me.
This seems like a really straightforward piece of legislation. Why is there any objection to it?
Sure, it begs the question, is this really about the science or is it about politics? If it's about the science, then we know now conclusively that masks hurt more than they helped. And even Fauci is now admitting that at a population level, yeah, maybe it didn't actually do anything. But now he's spinning and moving the goalposts and saying, but at an individual level, if some individuals that doesn't make any sense. Science is based on controlled studies. And sure, you could say, well, you didn't know at the very beginning. Let's try this and see what happens. You don't have that excuse anymore.
That's true.
The evidence is in that masks did not work and they did more harm than help. So we cannot reimpose it, especially on children in schools, again, when it comes to COVID, especially not now when it's been so long and so many years have passed and there's so much more natural immunity, which, by the way, is also scientific. You're supposed to consider natural immunity. But Fauci and company have buried their heads in the sand, and every time they've been called out on it, they've resisted and denied the reality because they are anti-scientific. And anything, this bill is more scientific once it's tailored to COVID than all the others. To the same, the data is in. Now we know masks did not work, and don't put them on kids.
I agree with you completely. But one thing I'm concerned about is that we're even really debating the efficacy of this decision, right? Because from where I stand, even if the masks were effective, say they decreased the transmission of COVID by 10% or something, that still doesn't mean the government can tell you have to wear this uniform. And yet that's what happened during the pandemic. People were required to do something. I think our understanding of our relationship with government has been turned on its head.
Oh, absolutely. And we are ruled by bureaucrats, not by the rule of law. That is a sad state of affairs that we got to this point where people like Fauci, who veil themselves with the mantle of science, dictate how we're supposed to live. It's parents who decide and take care of the welfare of their children, not a distant DC bureaucrat who happened to have been tragically, grossly wrong time and time again. And that's what makes it so frustrating, that they seem to be driven by arrogance, not by science. They're unwilling to admit that massive masking policies did not work and they caused harm to children. So yes, if somebody wants to voluntarily wear masks, it's a free country.
Right.
Wear double, triple masks. That's fine. You can wear as many masks as you want. But to force people to do it and to shame them for not doing it when it was unscientific to force them is galling. Right?
Yes.
We have to course correct, and this has to be a never again situation. So legislation is actually appropriate because the federal government went so far that we need to rein them in and say you cannot use this COVID excuse to mask our children. Let's just think for the moment. The educational and emotional deficits of this generation of school kids that were banned from schools, they were flat out barred through the lockdowns. And then when they did come in, they had to distance and wear masks so they couldn't see, they couldn't speak, they couldn't hear their teachers. I went through this with my kids. It was horrendous. And, the people who fell farthest behind were the most vulnerable and happened to be poor kids and Hispanic and African-American kids. And those are the ones who've been suffering the most, and you want to put them back in masks? No, enough is enough.
Yeah, and it's so anti-scientific, it's anti-human, and yet we're watching right now, Roger Severino, as a number of schools, including right here in our area, are reimposing mask mandates on some of the classrooms because they say one of the kids or two of the kids caught COVID, and now all of the kids in the class have to cover their faces with this uniform that does nothing to prevent the spread of COVID.
That's what is shocking is kids are the least likely to face serious health consequences. We knew from earliest days of COVID, I was at HHS at the time, it were elderly folks and people with comorbidities who are already sick, who had underlying health conditions. They were the ones most at risk. Thank God, the ones least at risk were the young, the healthy, right? And most children, by definition, they're young, and most of them are healthy, right? So the population least likely to be hurt are the ones that now we're rushing to mask. And we've seen that where we had pictures of leaders in classrooms where all the kids are masked, but the adults and the politicians are not. That is shocking that we would see such a thing. And kids are the one, we can't use kids as pawns in virtue signaling, because at this point, that's all that is when you're trying to mask kids, to somehow say that you're sending a message that has nothing to do with science or health. It has something to do with something else. authoritarianism, perhaps.
Right.
But it's certainly not protecting the health of children.
Roger Severino, you said a few minutes ago that people are not admitting what they got wrong. In fact, it's even worse than that, I think, because Ed Markey today, in objecting to this bill that would have stopped all the mask mandates from the federal level, at least, he said that the health infrastructure in this country did a great job. In fact, take a listen to this.
This bill is little more than an attempt by Republicans to dismantle a public health infrastructure that had to be built in order to deal with this greatest of pandemics since 1918.
Isn't it a little crazy to hear him say that? We were just talking about all the ways that the public health establishment screwed us, and now he's saying, actually, they did a great job and don't dismantle them.
Oh, yeah, that public health infrastructure, of course it has to be rolled back, because look how terribly it did in response to COVID. And here's another example. You had mask mandates in public areas of transportation, airports, on airplanes, etc. And this bill from JD Vance would also prohibit that sort of mask mandate from coming back. A federal judge, Kat Mizell, struck down that mandate, from Florida, struck it down for the nation. Has CDC said, look at the evidence now. We predicted there would be massive infection because this mask mandate was struck down by an unscientific judge. No evidence. Where is the evidence that there was rampant COVID infection after the judge struck down that mandate?
Yeah.
Right? This is the emperor has no clothes.
Well, that
the
thing
CDC
was crazy,
said,
too. We knew from you worked, of course, in the health environment inside of the Trump administration, and we knew from the very early days of the pandemic that it was impossible for you to catch COVID on an airplane. It is impossible to catch it on an airplane because of the filtration system on those planes.
Yeah. Filtration and ventilation. And people who tend to be very, very sick tend not to be traveling, right? So you have all these sorts of factors going on that make it a highly unlikely place to do it.
And we got all those media stories. We got all those media stories about how Americans are out of control and they're being ejected from airplanes and people are unruly. Well, yeah, that's because they value their liberty and they didn't want to wear a mask on a stupid plane for no reason. And it created massive amounts of division and consternation in our country.
Yeah, so many people stopped flying because of it. And how much that disrupts the economy, how much stress it causes people. I mean, suicide rates have gone up post-COVID. All this all-cause morbidity, reasons other than COVID, has gone up. The American life expectancy has gone down in the last couple of years. And it can't be explained fully by the COVID deaths, right? Yes. All these other effects, when you disrupt the society so fundamentally in every single way, that all adds up and it hurts people's health. So you had this natural experiment. The court said, we're getting rid of the mask mandate on airplanes. Did CDC do the studies and say, well, we're going to see this massive spike now in infections? Where is it? Where's the spike? You had your natural experiment, CDC, no spike, and they're exposed, right? And that's what they hate most. They think the credibility of scientists is more important than the truth. And that's exactly backwards.
So how do we cripple them? How do we remove their ability to hurt us again? What do we do, Roger Severino?
Well, we need political leadership that's willing to rein in our out-of-control agencies. So Heritage Foundation has been one of the leaders of Project 2025, which lays out the game plan of what to do when conservatives get back in power at the federal level. One of the ideas, specifically with CDC, is to make sure we separate their policy function with their scientific function, right? We have to have one part of CDC that just looks at the facts, what is going on, and another that would say, here's what we might want to do about it. You don't conflate it, because if you get facts that get challenged and you get these prescriptions they put out there, they start circling the wagons, right? You don't want people that are, making up the results as they go along to protect their own reputations that they've staked out. We got to end that. So you got to separate the scientific function from the policymaking function. Actually, the political branches control the policymaking function. Scientists can say the what. This is what's going on. It's the people, through their representatives, who should say, here's what we should do about it.
Yes. We
can never again have Fauci preaching to us like our priest or rabbi telling us this is what you morally should do. No, you're a scientist. You're not an ethicist. You just tell us what the risks are. We'll take care of the rest. And by the way, he didn't tell us what the risks were, not properly. He dissembled and kept moving the goalposts on certain areas. he kept the truth from the American people.
Yes, he admitted as much. He told the New York Times. Yeah, I know you're bringing it up now. He told the New York Times that he was changing the goalposts on natural immunity, to fit public polling.
Yeah, he said he knew what the proper levels of natural immunity were, and he said a different number knowingly, falsely to the American people because he thought they weren't ready for a higher number. And then he moved the goalposts later, and he admitted this, right, as if he's some sort of benevolent grandfather patting us on the head.
Yeah.
We're not subjects of his, but that's how he treated us.
No, not at all. And we need to right the ship here, big time. Roger Severino, thank you very much for your time and your analysis over at the Heritage Foundation, and please keep up the good work, sir. Really appreciate it today.
Thank you very much.
That's again Roger Severino, and what a world we live in, huh? Where these officials can just lie to us nonstop, and we've got to do something about it, don't we? So this week we had Marty Makary. Was it earlier this week? He had Dr. Marty Makary on. And he's not the only one. Dr. Marjorie Smelkinson also joined us. I got the name right that time. I always trip over it for some reason. It's just mental block. And they were both emphasizing something that you should know, that as the Biden administration is running around saying, another booster's on the way, another booster's on the way, the booster's so effective. That's what Karine Jean-Pierre said this week. They're lying. They're lying. I'm not saying it's not effective. If it performs anything like the old ones, it's nothing better. At the very best, it's a health supplement. It's not an actual vaccine. Vaccines prevent disease. Health supplements mitigate the effects. And they claim that this is mitigating the effects. Okay, at best, it mitigates the effects. At worst, it's hurting people really badly. And for Karine to step up to the microphone this week and then say, that this new booster is really effective and it's going to be great. It's a lie. She doesn't actually know that. Why doesn't she know that? Because they haven't done any studies on it. The government hasn't conducted any studies or trials on this. Marty Makary wrote a whole piece for the Wall Street Journal about this recently. He talked about it this week with us. Dr. Smelkinson talked about it this week. They're just lying. They make it up. And then when you call them out on it, they pretend like nothing ever happened. And then they take credit for how great everything went when everything was miserable. It's just Orwellian horse crap, newspeak. They just invent it as they go along. And if they sense a problem, chances are they created it. Then they tell you they have the solution, and then all that means is more power for them, and they make it worse. This is basically the formula for all governance in America in 2023. Yeah, if you want more evidence of people who are telling you the truth about health in the United States and the jab, here is Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo, who's just been so great on this new booster, the one that the Biden White House is saying you must get.
There's a new vaccine that's coming around the corner, a new mRNA COVID-19 vaccine, and there's essentially no evidence for it. There's been no clinical trial done in human beings showing that it benefits.
So you are an experiment, is the summary there.
Fits people. There's been no clinical trial showing that it is a safe product for people, and not only that, but then there are a lot of red flags. So something that you don't hear much about, but we'll be talking more about, is that there are multiple studies now from around the world, Brazil, I think Australia, United States, that show that over time, these vaccines, these mRNA COVID-19 products, actually increase your chances of contracting COVID-19. That's not normal.
That's an understatement. That's not normal, where you get a vaccine and you're more likely to catch the affliction. That's not normal at all. Let's see here. We've got a piece of audio for you today from Vice President Kamala Harris, who unfortunately is the second in command of the United States. Here she is speaking to CBS News and saying that the reason that people are critical of the Biden administration is because they are scared of our success. She's a ridiculous person.
They feel the need to attack because they're scared. that we will win.
Can they put laugh tracks on the news? Is it possible? Can we add laugh tracks to I think that would be a useful exercise. Somebody should make an entire YouTube channel called Laugh Track the News.
That we will win based on the merit of the work that Joe Biden and I and our administration has done.
The reporter's head exploded at the end of that sentence. The work that you've done. They're scared because if they don't listen to us, we might arrest them and throw them in jail for the rest of their lives. I'm sorry, because we're such a success. What did I say? Kamala Harris, a heartbeat away from the presidency of the United States. Yes, it's a scary, scary thought. Coming up, the great one, Mark Levin, right here on WMAL.